small point before we go to the next section is that I was having a chat with a friend from TM in the break. I think one good point that he mentioned was to the question on whether it should be a third party or operator-owned companies. I think the third, when you invite when there's a third party independent netco being formed, one important point of consideration is where is the competition to that, right? So as long as the regulator or the government promotes multiple such independent parties to be present in the market, then it is okay, because then you have competition to that third party, and hence you have a more competitive market in the place. But if there's only one player in the market or two players in the market, which probably creates uncompetitive situations, then it's probably not the most ideal. So it's something that we need to keep in mind when we think about third party versus operator owned. Third party with competition is probably the most ideal situation that we will have. Okay, so the next section is really about global case studies. What we have done is, these are some of the examples that we have analyzed. Some of these examples we have also worked with, especially in UK, we have worked with these operators to enable the network sharing to happen. We have been part of the process, so we really have good insights from these case studies. And some of the others we have really studied, and we have presented the insights from here. So as you can see, it's largely Europe and Australia based with some part of India, some examples from India. The question is, how relevant are these to the current market situation? But keep in mind that network sharing was really pioneered in the US, in Europe, right? So it was one of the first deals were struck in Europe, and hence it's probably the most relevant and the best examples to quote in terms of, and they have been through this journey for the last almost 6 to 8 years. And they have gone through all the various experimentations and have gone through the evolution, and have now finally arrived at a point where they have a successful model in place. So it's probably the most relevant to see, and India of course is closer to Malaysia, and hence some of the examples here would definitely be useful. And Australia as well has gone through a large number of years of evolution in network sharing, and definitely these examples will be very relevant here in Malaysia. So let's go down to the first case study, which is on UK. UK, there are two cases where one is Three UK and T-Mobile, other one is Vodafone and O2. Now, the first one is Three UK and T-Mobile, right? Now, the interesting part of this case study is that when T-Mobile was among the top 3 players in the market with 24% market share when they thought about sharing, this was back in 2007, and Three UK had only about 6% market share, right? So this is a case where there's a big operator like T-Mobile with 24%, and there's a small operator like Three UK with only 6%. However, the important point was Three UK had extensive 3G coverage. So this was the strategy for Three UK, for Hutchison 3 all the time, was to enter a market and build 3G networks and eventually sell the 3G network to a competitor, right? So Three UK had a 3G coverage at that point which T-Mobile could use. So the rationale really for them to come together was to reduce capex and opex costs, especially for 3G coverage. So T-Mobile wanted to expand its 3G coverage and use Three UK as a vehicle to do so. The deal structure was a 50-50 joint venture. They formed a company called MBNL, which was solely responsible for the network infrastructure. And then NSN, Ericsson, and Huawei were the equipment and services provider for MBNL. So they gave a managed services contract to these 3 players to manage the equipments and the network for MBNL. The scope was pretty much everything. So you had RAN, backhaul, passive infrastructure, but all of it was only for 3G. There was no 2G equipment in place. So the RAN, backhaul and passive for 3G was under the scope of MBNL. The operations consolidation was completed in 37 months, with over 12,500 sites consolidated and over 2,000 sites switched off, right? So 12,500 sites were consolidated, and 2,000 were switched off because essentially they were overlapping sites which one of them had to switch off so the other one could use the network, right? You will usually find numbers, 2,000 is probably a small number, but usually you'll find it higher if the operators are of equal size. When you have one small and one big operator, typically the percentage of sites that overlap is smaller. But when you have two large operators cooperating, then you will find that the percentage size consolidated will be even higher than this. And as you can see, the expected savings was about $2 billion in 5 years, $2 billion in 5 years. So this was a huge saving potential for both T-Mobile and Three UK, right? Now, whether this expected saving was actually realized is something that we will never know, but this was what they had projected as a business case when they started into the case. Now, the other case, which is Vodafone and O2, is a little different than Three UK and T-Mobile. Here was the marriage of equals. Vodafone had about 24% market share, and O2 had about 27% market share. This was back in 2009, and when they entered into a joint venture where resource pooling was formalized to a joint venture and a JV company, and again they formed a 50-50 joint venture. Now, the way they did this was Vodafone and O2 would control and manage operations in the JV in different geographies, right? So in England, they split England into England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and each of the operator would get control of one geography, and they would build and manage the network in that geography, with the other operator essentially roaming onto this operator's network, right? So this was a very interesting case study where not only did they form a 50-50 joint venture, but they also geographically split operations into two different regions of the country and managed them independently, right? So the scope was pretty much even including 2G, so it was 2G, 3G, and 4G, and then about 18,500 sites were expected to be consolidated and 2,000 to be switched off. So the key lessons that we learned from UK is that first is that the collaborating entities need not be of a similar size for the deal to succeed. So you have a case where there is Three UK, which is 6%, and T-Mobile is 24%. Somebody asked this question earlier about why would a smaller operator, a large operator, form a deal with a smaller operator. So in this case, it was because of technology. T-Mobile did not have 3G license or 3G network, and they used Three UK to use that, right? The second important case study is that sharing typically starts with passive infrastructure and new technologies like 3G. So for example, when Three UK and T-Mobile, which was in 2007, when they went into a deal, it was only about 3G. But they are subsequently, but now I don't have it here, but subsequently they expanded the scope of agreement to more than 3G to 2G as well, right? And then the first thing they started off with was actually passive infrastructure. So they first started looking at all the passive sites, seeing how many were overlapping, consolidate those sites. Once the sites are consolidated and then working fine, the next step was to then look at all your RAN network, and especially in this case they were launching new RAN network, so it's easy for them to just merge the two RAN networks together and build the network together. The third lesson was that operations were handled differently by both. In case of Three UK, it was a joint venture. The joint venture gave a managed services contract to an equipment services provider. Whereas in the other case, in Vodafone and O2, the case is essentially where they split the geography into two distinct geographies, and each of them handled one piece of the geography, and hence it was more a geographical play than a joint venture managed services play. So these are probably some of the interesting points from this case study. Now, the other point that I'd like to mention is Vodafone and O2 have now also gone to the next level where they're also now doing for 4G. I mean, when they started, it was prospectively for 4G, but now we know that they are actually doing it for 4G as well. So let's go to the next case study, which is in Australia. Okay, Australia is a very, very interesting case study. So you will see that the first deal was between Telstra and Hutchison. Again, as I mentioned before, Hutchison's strategy was always to build a 3G network. So at that point, when the sharing was announced, Hutchison had 4% market share, Telstra had 67% market share. So a large and a small operator, but Hutchison had a 3G RAN, which was important for Telstra to grow the 3G network, and hence they went into this partnership. It was a 50-50% joint venture. They formed a new entity called 3GIS, responsible for operating and maintaining only the 3G network. Telstra made a payment of 450 million. I mean, these are just points. I mean, these are public information. You guys can look it up as well. Made a payment of 450 million to Hutchison to gain access to his 3G network. So it was It was a mutual sharing, but there was obviously a large payment from one party to the other for the gain of 3G network. And then in this case, there was the scope of the sharing was 3G RAN and roaming. So I'm mentioning roaming here because you had Hutchison, which is a small operator, now getting access to a large coverage area of Telstra, which was 2G. And the way they made that happen was for Hutchison to roam on to Telstra, right? So Hutchison got access to Telstra network and was able to roam on to Telstra's network and gain access to the coverage that Telstra had. But what happened is interesting is that Telstra pulled out of the partnership after Vodafone bought Hutchison. So it was a competitive situation where Vodafone, which was the other large operator in the market, bought Telstra and bought Hutchison and its assets. And then once that happened, Telstra did not want to enter into a partnership with Vodafone and pulled out of the partnership, right? Now that's mainly because Vodafone already had an existing partnership with Optus, which is the other operator in the market, and Telstra did not want to partner with both Vodafone and Optus together, right? So that really comes to the next case study, which is Vodafone and Optus. Now Optus and Vodafone were roughly about the same market share. Optus was about 30%, Vodafone was 15%, and they started pulling way back in 2004. Telstra started in 2005, but Hutchison started way back in 2004. Both had access to 50% of the capacity, 50% of the investments, and then the scope was both 2G and 3G network. Right? They started sharing about 3,000 BTSs nationwide, and about 2,000 of which are already operational. By which I mean that they were already operational when the deal was announced, and so they had to just consolidate the two. The current status is that Vodafone and Optus signed a new agreement in 2013 for sharing 2G, 3G and prospectively 4G. And this expected savings of almost about 300 million in 5 years. So as you can see, the numbers are pretty huge. In case of T-Mobile in UK, we saw $2 billion. Here we're seeing 300 million. And then, in case of Telstra Hutchison, it was about 450 million. So the scale of the sharing is potentially large and can potentially be transformational, as Rajesh was saying. A tectonic shift when it comes to cost savings, and this can really propel operators forward, and hence that forms the key case for network sharing. So the key lessons from Australia is that one is that three-way partnerships are tough to execute. So as you see that when Vodafone bought Hutchison, there was a potential case for a three-way partnership between Telstra, Vodafone and Optus. But that never happened because it's not they tried to do it for almost a year while Telstra was in talk with Vodafone and Optus, but it never went through because it's not the most easiest thing. You have three different parties with different agendas, different strategic visions coming together and aligning on network is not the easiest thing to achieve. The other lesson is that players must be wary of consolidation. So this is an eminent threat in every market, is that the partner that you're going to partner with can be acquired tomorrow, can leave the market tomorrow, can suddenly change its strategic direction, might go into suddenly someone who's focused on cost reduction today might suddenly be focused on a niche subscriber base tomorrow, and hence this is the reality of our nature of business, is that the dynamics keep changing almost on a yearly basis, and operators will have to ensure that the contracts and the JVs that they form have clauses in them which protect them from either an exit or which protect them from one operator changing the strategic direction. So this is an important part which I think was learned through, these players learned the hard way. Telstra and Vodafone were literally in a lawsuit for almost 2 to 3 years for this to happen. So they learned it the hard way, but this can really be solved here as today the operators in this room are thinking about network sharing. So next one is India. India is always a poster child for site sharing, not much active sharing, but you find a lot of site sharing going on in India. One of the largest markets with site sharing. The interesting thing I want to bring out here is really the deal between Bharti Airtel, Vodafone and Idea Cellular. The reason for this is, it's interesting, is that this is a three-way partnership, not the easiest thing to achieve. India is probably one of the very few examples where you will find a three-way partnership. And that's because, and also because, if you look at the market shares, each of them But pretty much, I mean, Airtel and Vodafone were not too different in market share. Idea probably was smaller, but Vodafone and Airtel was almost similar. The rationale really was very simple. India is a large market, a very huge market. The only way that these operators could reduce time to market and optimize cost was site sharing. I mean, there was no other way to do it. And Bharti Airtel was a pioneer in ensuring that all operations are reduced, the cost is reduced, and hence the three of them could come together to make this happen, right? The deal structure was Indus with 42%, Bharti Airtel, Indus with 42% Bharti Airtel, 42% Vodafone, and 16% from Idea. Nearly 70,000 assets were brought under the purview, right? So this is a huge number. 70,000 sites were under the purview of the newly established entity, right? And this was mainly for passive. There were a number of operational issues. I mean, PwC has worked very closely with Indus the last 5 years, and we know the operational challenges that have occurred because of this deal, right? There were a number of challenges. First is just consolidation of operations. Each company had very different process, systems were different, the way they execute stuff, the ideology, the way they, what priorities they give to what activities were very different. And just pooling them together between 3 different companies was a tremendous task. We did a lot of change management and program management for them, where we know the resistance that people had towards adopting new technologies and new systems, and how it had to really. This is where the point about business decision comes in. The decision really has to come from the top for the change to happen. Otherwise, you're going to find that this will keep prolonging, the operational consolidation will keep prolonging for years. There are also other issues, mainly a capital gains tax issue. Basically, when the towers were pooled together, they pooled it into a separate entity, and then Indus was just leasing from this entity. This was just to avoid tax, a tax structure that they put in place. But the regulator and the government later, about 5 years later, opened this case up and said that they can't do this because they are trying to save capital gains tax to this. And this became a big lawsuit, and then it went on, and it's still ongoing against Vodafone. So these are interesting points. Is that the key lessons that we learned is that operation consolidation is often a complex task. Sometimes it needs a revamp of existing process systems, requires change management, it requires a mindset change among the operations of various companies, and the mandate really should come from the top. But this could also be at the same time an opportunity to assess your current systems, assess your current processes, and maybe refine them when you're bringing them together. And there will always be cases where efficiency can be gained, right? So some of your current systems processes may not be as efficient as the best practices, and this might be an opportunity while you're revamping it to kind of make it right and bring them together at the same time. And then tax and legal considerations are very important. I mean, the entity formation is probably the first problem really is to choose the right partner. But once the partner is chosen, how do you form the entity? How do you protect yourself from lawsuits and others is going to be an important consideration. So those were the 3 case studies that we talked about. As you can see, that they are diverse examples, giving different insights. And as I said, we worked with some of these very closely. I've just put the key points here, but there are a number of other lessons that I'm happy to share with any of you at a later point if any of you require. So let's go to the next section, which is, we talked about the case for network sharing. We talked about why we are at the point where we need to start thinking about it more actively. We talked about what are the different types of network sharing, from passive to active to full network sharing. And then we talked about some of the global case studies and what we have learned from those case studies. So what does this all mean to Malaysian telecom operators and Malaysian market? Right? And that's essentially this section is what are the considerations for Malaysia? Right? So as you can see, the network sharing has a wide impact. And this is just a framework, but I think the first box that I would like to focus upon is that what are the key considerations? And I see 6 of them, and this is what we think. You can ask me more questions later if required. But what we think, the 6 questions that we think are important is that First of all, is this the right time to consider network sharing? I mean, we know that there's a need, but is the market ready for it? And is this the right time to consider network sharing, right? Second is, what flavors of network sharing will be applicable here? What should you be choosing? What should you be thinking about? Third is who to partner with. So what are some of the drivers or thought process behind who to partner with so that you make this happen and execute it well? How to model the benefits and savings. So this is a very important point which is often overlooked. How do you go about building the case for network sharing? Like Rajesh said, there has to be a P&L. You probably have to be doing cash flow projections. You're probably doing a business case that says that this is net NPV positive, for example. So how do you build that case? How do you even think about it, right? Then fifth one is that what should be the operating model? So should it be a JV? Should it be a third party? Should it be a wholesale operator? What should be the operating model? The sixth one is then really what are the key challenges that you need to guard yourself against, and how do you guard yourself against those key challenges? So those are the six key considerations that I think every one of us here should be thinking about before we start the exercise about network sharing itself, right? So let's go to the first question. Is this the right time to consider sharing? So we know there is a need, as we have very clearly stated in our past, there's a need, but is this the right time? And we believe it is, mainly because first, I mean, you already are thinking about it. Operators here are already talking about sharing. Now we have Celcom Axiata, which has formed an independent TowerCo, E.co. So you already have an existing example of an independent tower company in the market. We know that there are various operators talking to each other about network sharing. There have been some deals signed about passive sharing as well. So the operators here are currently talking about it. So it is not a new concept, and definitely there's a buzz around it, right? And obviously the reason why all of you are here are probably also because you find this an interesting topic. The next one is the regulators encouraging network sharing. It has been for a long time encouraging it, and I think it still is, and probably one of the reasons why MCMC is organizing this as well as to show the support that they're giving to this concept in this market, right? And then the last one is really 4G deployment. Now 4G deployment, as you will see later, could be a very key catalyst in this market for network sharing. Now, all the examples that we have seen in the past the network sharing has been in a new technology. That's because when you're deploying 4G, you probably are swapping out some of your old sites and you're deploying new technology to the old sites. As you do the swap out process is the time when you can now think about sharing. If there's an adjacent operator next to you which also has the same technology, then you can swap out together and then share. And 4G as a technology offers all the right, the equipments all offer the right technology for sharing as well. They are all enabled to share it, right? And I think 4G is definitely the future. Also it may not be because of that you want to promote LTE, but also because purely from a cost per megabit, 4G makes sense. As a technology, it makes sense. So in the long run, it's very clear that most of you are going to swap out to 4G just to reduce cost, if not to promote the LTE service as such, right? So this could be a good starting point to think about sharing as well. So we believe that this is the right time, and this is the time that we all need to take this to the next level. As I said, there's already something going around, but we need to take it to the next level and really make this happen. And I'm sure there's going to be operators talking, but I'm sure MCMC is also going to be in support of it and try to make this happen going forward. All right, so the next question that we want to answer is, which flavors of network sharing to consider? And this is really our opinion about it, and it's just based on what we see. It's no way the final approach, but it really is something that we can consider, right? Now, in terms of all these that we say, there's a complexity to the implementation itself, right? As you go deeper into active sharing, it gets more and more complex, simply because operators coming together are not willing to lose control of quality of service, are not willing to lose control of the network assets. And as you go down deeper and deeper, the complexity is going to increase. So the first and foremost, the first point to start is really tower site sharing. Now this is something that you're probably already doing, but we believe that there is a case to take it to the next level if you take a census or an assessment today, you will find that 25 to 30% of the sites between operators probably overlap, right? So which means that where there's a site for Cellcom, probably in a few hundred meters you'll find a cell site for Maxis, and then probably a few hundred meters you'll find a cell site for Digi, right? About 25 to 30% of the sites already overlap. Just consolidating them and ensuring that there is, ensuring that there is only one site in all these overlapping sites will probably give you tremendous cost savings. And it's probably the most easiest thing to achieve as well. Not from a technology point of view, of course from an operational point of view there are challenges, but from a technology point of view it's probably the most easiest thing to achieve, right? But yeah, but operationally, who dismantles the site? Should it be operator 1 versus operator 2? What should be the consideration is something that is definitely more challenging and is something which we need to think through more closely. So that really forms the first entry point into site sharing. The next one is 4G and 3G RAN. Now, mainly because 3G and 4G RANs are also more amenable to site sharing. So as I said, as you are deploying 4G RAN, as you go into new sites, new areas in Malaysia where you're deploying 4G, you form a 4G alliance with, say, multiple operators come together, form 4G alliances, and they develop jointly the network with one operator, the combined entity forming, jointly deploying the network, and the other operator essentially leasing capacity, right? This has been a successful model across the world. These are what we call as 4G wholesale operators. So 4G wholesale operators have been very successful across the world, where there are one or two entities which lead the market in terms of 4G deployment, and all the other operators just are leasing capacity. So in this way, because 4G is a technology where all your capacity might not be completely utilized in the first few years. As you see data adoption slowly rising, it's only in about 3 years is where you're at the peak. In the first 3 years, there's a lot of excess capacity. So you really don't want to deploy a lot of capex into something which is just going to give you excess capacity, right? And just 3 operators or 2 operators coming together and utilizing the capacity more effectively is probably the best solution that you have, right? And then the next one is fiber transmission. Now this is something which, I'm not sure about Malaysia, but there are a lot of overlapping fiber rings across the world. I mean, we see this in every market, the overlapping fiber rings, the overlapping fiber connections. Now, you probably have optimized it to some extent where you're leasing fiber from each other or from third-party vendors. But fiber transmission itself needs to be re-looked very carefully, and then there's definitely a scope to bring all fiber transmission into an independent company and then leasing fiber out of them as well. So this has been also done in various markets, can be used in Malaysia. I'm not saying it should be, it can be used in Malaysia. So only after you do these 3 years when you will consider 2G RAN. 2G RAN is probably the toughest because the technology is relatively unexplored, mainly because the legacy equipments do not support it. So if you have old equipments, they do not support sharing, especially active sharing very easily. So only it's a new, when you swap out is when you will go into active sharing. And then finally you come into backhaul, which is BTS, BSC transmission, and then you go into core. So as you can see, the core is probably the last one that any operator is going to take up, simply because it's also complex to implement, and also you're going to lose control, the issues of control, the issues of quality of service, which operators are going to be very protective about, right? But this is really the evolution, right? You start from site sharing, which is probably something that you're already doing, you take it to the next level, then you go into 3G and 4G, and then you slowly go down into the core, right? And the core can be done on a selective basis, in selective areas, maybe to give redundancy, maybe to give extra capacity, right? So that really was what we see as evolution based on all the examples that we see. So if I've just summarized this, if you see what we see, the examples I talked about, almost all the time it has been 3G and passive is probably the most frequently occurring among all the case studies that we've seen, right? And that's mainly because 3G was the catalyst for most of these deals, right? For them to do sharing, and also because the technology allowed it. And passive was probably the most easiest to achieve in terms of technology-wise, right? So let's go ahead. The next question, which was who to partner with. Now, this is probably the most difficult, the most critical piece of the whole engagement, if you do one, is who should I consider partnership with? And this is based on, so we have, so just to, this is just a framework in which you guys can think about it, is that there are strategic, technology, and operations related drivers, right? So from a strategic point of view, what is the objective of sharing, right? Now, the objective of sharing needs to be complementary to each other, right? When two operators come together, one of them might have cost savings, the other might also have cost savings. And these are complementary mainly because both see it in the same way, right? For one of them, it might be cost savings, the other might be access to technology. For one, it might be access to technology, the other might be access to subscriber base, right? So the strategic rationale has to really come together. But it cannot be that one is looking at it from a 3G rollout and the other is looking at it from, say, from a subscriber base, because they're not complementary. Both can't achieve the same objective if we have two diverse objectives, right? So what is the objective of sharing is the first thing to look at. The next one is the service and network evolution, right? How do they want to roll out? What is the strategic vision for each operator? Which areas do they want to cover? Where do they want to reach in the next 10 years? Where do they want to be in the next 5 years? Purely from a network point of view, right? Do they see themselves going into voice over LTE, for example? Do operators want to go into voice over LTE in the next 5 years? Some might say, no, we don't want to go voice over LTE, we might just want to move into a fixed broadband or a wireless broadband network. So it really depends. So the rationals will have to agree upon each other. Next is technology network related, which is what are the architectures of the two operators? The technology is being shared. Is one on a very legacy platform where the technology is very complicated, whereas the other is on an advanced platform with a different technology. Now, typically you don't find too many differences between operators in a particular market, but there might be a case if there's a new entrant which came in late and did something very drastically different than the other operators. And then there should be a complementary network portfolio, right? So the best marriage is when the two operators have geographically diverse portfolio of network. So when you come together, both of them get a wider coverage. However, it is not always the case. In Malaysia, we know that almost all operators have very good coverage, but there might be a case where one might be weaker in some other area, another might be weaker in the area that you are strong in. And that could be the rationale why we come together. And the last one is operations, very key, as I talked about, in the case of Indus. How divergent are the processes? How divergent are the tools? How divergent is the culture within the company itself? Which will make it longer for the consolidation to happen, right? And then what are the outsourcing plans? Is one operator completely managed services provider, completely outsourced with and going through further outsource, where the other one is probably not, it's probably in the initial stages, right? There are two different stages of evolution, very different in terms of the way they will operate within the company. So these, I think, are some of the key points that you need to think about when you think about partnership. Now, in all the cases that we analyzed, as I said, one thing that I want to bring in terms of, there's always an understanding that a small operator and a big operator is not going to be successful, but we have seen many examples of it. And then the reason for sharing has either been 3G rollouts or faster network rollout. Almost always has been faster network rollout, but 3G has been a major catalyst among all, right? So this is what we see from examples as to why they've come together. And just to tell you that these are the things you need to think about. So I'm just moving fast. We'll come to a Q&A later. I just want to cover all the stuff we want to talk about, and then we'll come to Q&A. So finally, then, once you agree upon what are the techniques, network sharing techniques you want to adopt, who you're going to partner with, the next one really is, how do I build the business case, right? So how do I quantify the benefits and essentially convince the board, convince the shareholders, convince everybody that this is what we want to do, right? So this is where we need to study a lot of due diligence that needs to be done in terms of the network data that is there and the market conditions that are there, right? And this is an often overlooked step which we believe has been the detrimental case for many of the operators, is that if you do not, see, the business case can always be projected to be the best business case. You can always project it to be the best, but if enough due diligence is not done, you're almost always not going to reach the goal that you set, right? There will be many cases where the operators think that they can consolidate X number of sites. At the end of 5 years, you will see that they have done maybe 20% of that or 30% of that, right? So our framework, this is just our framework based on what we've seen, is that first you define what to share, and this is really one of the previous key considerations is, once you define what is the model of sharing, then you decide which parts of your network you need to share, where do those values lie, and then you think about how to gather network data. And this is going to be a very crucial step, because the network data doesn't reside in the same format in every operator. Each operator stores it differently based on the systems and tools they've used, based on the legacy process. So you need to gather network data, and then really comes validating a lot of assumptions behind the data, right? So whether, for example, what we are saying is, whether if I gather the capacity in a particular geography in Malaysia, right? Now the case for sharing comes with this unutilized capacity. So the first step would be to gather the unutilized capacity that is there across the network. Then you see, then the other operator does the same, and then you see within the same geography who has which operator has a higher utilization. And that operator becomes the lead operator in terms of leading the network sharing in that region. This is just purely because you can share to segregate which parts of the network will be shared by them, right? Whereas in another region where the first operator has lower capacity utilized, and the other operator has higher capacity, becomes the lead operator. So this could be so first is you have to gather network data, and then you need to validate a lot of these assumptions, which itself is going to take a lot of time. And then you're going to analyze all these scenarios as to saying, if one operator becomes the lead, what is going to be the benefit that is going to come out of it? If the other operator becomes the lead, what is the net benefit that's going to come out of it? And then finally, you're going to put them together and say, this is an overall case for network sharing. These are all the unutilized capacity that we can leverage. These are all the places where we can dismantle. These are all the places where we can redeploy the network, and hence the total benefits that we're going to get out of this. Now, this is a very step-by-step and meticulous process. I think we've seen this typically take about 2 to 3 months, or even longer at times. But at the end of it, you probably have a better understanding and a more closer understanding of what is the true potential that you're going to gain out of this network sharing, right? And the true potential, and this is where, and everything else will hinge on this. Your future program management is going to hinge on this potential that you come up with in this process. So once you define what are the ways to quantify the savings, the next one is really to define what should be the operating model, right? So I said this is probably the toughest. Once you decide the partner, which is the toughest thing, the next hurdle is how do you model the benefits, and then what structure do you adopt? So we have seen various models that have been adopted. I've just summarized all of them into this one slide. The first one is, so you form a JV where you're pooling the assets together. So JV of assets, but you keep the operations separate. So only the assets come together, but the operations are still different. So each asset, which was originally, say for example, an operator A and operator B bring the assets together, the assets owned by operator A are still managed by operator A in the same way that they were managing it before. And the assets owned by operator B are still managed by operator B, right? So we're keeping the operations separate. This is what Vodafone and O2 did. The way they did it was to actually geographically split the market. So in one geography, one operator takes care of all the assets and all the markets and all the management. In the other geography, the other operator takes care of it. This is what Vodafone and O2 did. The next one is JV of assets and also the operations together. So you pool your operations as well together. So not only are you pooling the assets, you're pooling the people, you're pooling the systems, you're pooling the tools, you're pooling the processes together into the JV. And maybe you could also outsource that to an O&M vendor, like a managed services player. Right? So this is what Vodafone, Optus did, Telia and Tele2 in Sweden did. The challenge here really is the organizational changes. right? So you're now, because you're going beyond the assets, you're going into systems, tools, and the people, and also looking at a managed services player. So there are organizational impact, and that's going to be the key challenge here, right? The third option is really JV versus the managed services player, which is what I already talked about. Is that you're not only pooling the operations together, you're outsourcing it to a third party, right? To get additional savings. So if you look at the savings potential with each of this, here you're only gaining savings out of the assets. Here you're gaining savings out of operations by just pooling people together. In the third one, you're outsourcing it and you're taking the potential of savings to the next level. However, the challenge here is that you'll have to manage the MSP, right? And the MSP will now have a larger portfolio to play with, and you know, it's probably, you know, not all MSPs are ready for it. You know what I mean? So basically, the scale of operations at MSP, the risk that the MSP takes is higher in this case, because the MSP is now responsible for two operators with a large pool of assets with probably the same SLAs, right? The risk for the managed services provider is going to be higher, and it's not going to be easy for them to be able to meet this SLA requirement. It also will depend upon whether the MSP is already a part of the existing operators. So sometimes one operator already has an MSP agreement, and hence it probably now as an additional responsibility is probably easier. But if the MSP has never worked with both the operators in the past, then it's definitely a new change that comes in, right? And definitely more complex. The last one, which is an interesting model, is what we call as wholesale resellers. These are operators who completely own the assets and are leasing out capacity to other operators. So this is not, so you're spinning, it's a joint venture, but it is completely spun out of the control of the existing operators. And you probably are getting in third-party investments as well. So once you form the joint venture, you probably are getting in a private equity player, you're probably getting in a managed services player from outside, or you're getting independent tower companies and netcos from outside to invest into the JV. And what you form is what we call as a wholesale reseller. Now these are wholesale players who own the network and are leasing out capacity, right? This was a model that was adopted in LightSquared, by LightSquared in the USA. Unfortunately, LightSquared went bankrupt, but not for reasons of this. They went bankrupt because of some other spectrum-related issues that they had. And then Tele2 in Sweden also does this model, and there are numerous other examples which, you know, where numerous other markets where adopted this model. And we see this happening mainly in new technologies like 4G, where you have a 4G wholesale reseller, and that operator is responsible for building the 4G network in the market and is leasing out capacity. The typical concern to the regulator in cases like this is that the wholesale operator now becomes a monopoly. I mean, in some markets it can become monopolistic in nature because it is owning a large portion of the network that is being used by the operators. And the quality of service will depend upon this one entity, right? So there are competitive issues, but definitely, so the one way to solve that problem is to introduce competition within the wholesale reseller market. So you create a wholesale reseller market and introduce competition within that, where you bring in new wholesale resellers, and that probably helps to build competition in the market. But it's definitely a concern. We have seen this, I think in UK they tried to do this, was definitely a concern for the regulator there to implementing this to happen. So the most common example that we have seen from all the examples is the JV with 50% of both the parties. This is what is the most common. But having said that, see, I mean, these are just global examples. I think Malaysia has to find its unique or its own unique path into this, because the dynamics here are different, the people are different, and it really is, at the end of the day, a market dynamics versus people's game, right? So I'm just showing you what other countries did, but what we're saying is Malaysia will have to find its unique path into it, and there are new models like the wholesale reseller that can definitely be explored in this market. Now, one key thing that comes in is that the ownership structure, when you decide the ownership structure, how do you define the relative ownership between the two operators? There are two approaches to this. One is you either base it on number of equipments. So if one operator brings in 10,000 towers, the other operator brings in 5,000 towers, the ratio of the two becomes the ownership structure. The other way to do it is, which is the better way to do it, is what is the relative quality of the towers. So one of them has rooftop towers in urban locations which are of higher, which can generate more higher revenue. The other one is based, so you base it based on the relative quality of the towers, which is probably the better approach to take. But we've seen both happen, but the better approach to take is really based on the relative quality. And these are just some examples that we see from our experience. Okay, so what are the key challenges? So basically what I've covered so far is this the right time? We believe it is. What are the considerations for choosing the right partner, in terms of strategic, technology, and operations? What are the, how do you think about building the case? What are the steps you need to use to build the case for network sharing within the company? How do you quantify benefits? And then what are the operating models that you need to adopt, right? So whether it's a joint venture, whether it's a wholesale reseller. Now all of this at the end of the day boils down to implementing, right? Once you do all of this, there are going to be implementational tasks and the number of challenges there. And I think this slide is just, we're just trying to explain what are some of the challenges and how do you overcome that. The first one, so I've split this into commercial and operation. The first one is commercial. So the first challenge that everybody faces is that there's a probable loss of service level differentiation, right? And the loss of unique brand identity, because now all operators, the two operators are coming together, have the same quality of service with respect to network, at least in some parts, not the entire network, but in some parts of the network. And sometimes the brand name is based on the quality of the network. In many markets, you find the brand name is based on the quality of the network as well, right? So how do you overcome that? So basically, this is a no-brainer. Basically, the differentiation should come in terms of service, quality of service, the service delivery rather than the quality of service of the network, right? That's because the network is in most cases, in most markets today, the customers are taking the network for granted. The network is becoming more an asset which can no longer lead to tremendous differentiation, right? It is the quality of service, it is the customer service, it is the packages, it is the price points. That's where really the differentiation comes in. And each operator can use the savings that he generates out of this in different ways. One operator can invest the savings into, say, an aggressive pricing strategy. The other operator can invest into customer care or sales and distribution, right? So that's really where the differentiation lies, and that is where I think the future is going to be as well. Next one is, the next commercial consideration is, what are the complications and exit mechanisms? As we see that, the dynamics keep, as I said before, the dynamics in the market will keep changing. Operators will have to guard themselves against exits, against changing dynamics, and they should have clauses which can enable them to exit easily if required from a particular deal. And this will require you to make the contracting process robust to entail that all the termination processes are taken care of, right? And this definitely is a key challenge. The next one is in terms of alignment of business objectives with correct drivers. This is essentially to say that how do you quantify CapEx, OpEx, and whether those CapEx, OpEx are really being realized. The savings potential is being realized. And this will require the due diligence that I talked about, is to really carefully look at what the CapEx, OpEx savings are, and then build the model based on a very careful due diligence. So that covers the commercial challenges. The next one is operational. The operational challenges are, the first one is different technologies, right? It's a very big challenge, which basically, when operators with different technologies are coming together, what we see normally is that there's a mandate from the top level to say that network sharing has to happen, but it's at the working level where two engineers are sitting across each other and saying one should dismantle the site and the other should keep the site, right? It's that level where usually the problem comes in, where engineers are usually very closer to the network that they built, and it's not easy for them to give up, right? And how do you manage, and especially if it's different technologies, it makes it even worse. So how do you manage that? And then the only way to do it is to explore different forms of sharing. The next one is different third-party vendor agreements. So vendor agreements and termination costs could potentially nullify the cost savings. So this is basically, you have your existing vendor agreements. Now you're dismantling a site because you're sharing it, and that could potentially mean that you may have to terminate the vendor agreement or expand the scope of the vendor agreement. Now the cost sometimes of that could nullify the potential cost savings. So this should be factored into the business case. Essentially the way to solve it is this should be factored into the business case, which often is overlooked at the time of building the business case, and then it comes as a revelation later on. Then the cost related to redimensioning of network, consolidation of process and systems, and then misalignment of service evolution strategies. So all this can be solved through the initial business case where you factor all these challenges into it, right? We have seen deals that have broken down because at the time of consolidation of process and systems, the cost has become so high of just doing that the management takes a call to just walk away from the deal, because they just didn't realize it when they started the business case. They didn't even factor for it as a cost in the overall business case, right? So these are challenges that you have to think upfront and make sure that they are factored in, make sure that everybody is aware of it, and built into the deal. And honestly, if you build a business case where the cost is too high, and if it doesn't work through, it is obviously something that you'll never enter into in the first place, and avoid the hassle of building, of going through this process itself. Then there are organizational challenges. Workforce rationalization and shareholding is probably the biggest of them. So the organization definitely will have to change. So there have to be organizational replanning when network sharing happens. And this is something that will be part of the change management process that you have. And then finally the regulatory. Regulatory bottlenecks can definitely creep up, especially in areas like spectrum. The other area that I mentioned is that there could be concerns from the regulator that there's a monopoly being created when two large operators come together, because you now have a larger control of network. So I think it'll have to, each operator will have to work very closely with MCMC in this case, in setting the right policies, the right framework. And I see that this is not something which is easy to tackle. It has to take its own path and own evolution, and then we'll have to come up with the right approach. So as you can see, that these are some of the challenges that we see. Definitely not an easy thing to achieve, but it's one of those things that can lead to a transformational change. And any transformational change is going to take time. It's going to take a lot of coming together, a lot of discussions, and it's not going to be easy. So we're just making you aware of some of the challenges. The point that we want to take away, what all of you take away from this is that the challenges apart, I think the global case studies that I mentioned and some of the issues that you mentioned, I think Malaysia will have to find its own unique path into this. And the unique path can only be created when all the operators come together, sit and discuss, and arrive at some of the consensus points, right? And then these need not necessarily be the only ways to do it, but these are some of the considerations. But you have to form your own unique path into this network sharing evolution, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people here to support that path. So that I think covers all the questions. Rajesh, you want to take summary?